All right, we're live.
Okay, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sorry, I'm a little, okay. As a way of respecting, honoring, and creating awareness about our past, we begin our village board meetings by acknowledging that New Paltz is on the ancestral land of the Munsee, Esopus, and Lenape people.
And I just have one addition to the business agenda. We're going to insert number 9, Stewart's application fee waiver. Any other changes we want to make, village board?
I just wanted to do a report of the Affordable Housing Board. It could be during announcements or as an agenda item. I don't care either way. Oh, there, she already put it. Okay.
It's there.
Okay,
under
I see it.
announcement.
Sorry, that was what I was stumbling over, getting to the acknowledgement. I was just pulling that up.
Okay, motion.
I see it there.
We move the consent agenda and the business agenda as amended.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Do we have any public comments, Ariana?
Nope. No,
Okay.
none so far.
Okay, so we have at least the update on the Affordable Housing Board. Katie, you want to walk us through that?
Yeah, I
And
just
then
wanted to give a quick update. It's fresh on my mind because the board met last night. They're meeting on Zoom. The biggest task that they typically do is to review applications to be on the eligibility list for when affordable units open. And, you know, shout out to them and the village boards, staff who helped them figure out how to do it during COVID, because it's a lot of confidential information and they have to look at things that usually, you know, they throw it out on the table, but it's not stuff that we can distribute without a lot of sensitivity to privacy. So I wanted to thank them, and they've really gotten good at doing this process, which is really good because last night they had more applications ever than before. And I think that's because many of us have been pushing out that when Zero Place opens up early next year, that there's going to be affordable housing units. So I wanted to mention, if anyone thinks they might be eligible for affordable housing, you can go to the village website and go to the Affordable Housing Board and see the application packet. You do have to scroll down a little bit. The biggest thing to look at on the, it's called the eligibility application, is to look at the thresholds for income, and they're both for rental units and for homeowner units. So check that out and see if your income is within those thresholds. It's on right at the top of the application. Check out that application. If you have any questions, you can ask the village clerk. But you know, we want to get as many people into the system as we can. Obviously, the need is much greater than the people who need it. But we've developed a pretty good process by which we create a list of people to place in units. And it's been fits and starts and learning over the last several years, and slow. But now, you know, that we have some coming on with Zero Place, I don't know, it feels pretty good to get all these applications and to know that we'll be able to help folks get connected with Zero Place and then any other units that come available next year, which I suspect, given planning board applications, that might be the case. Or maybe not next year. Things take a long time, but yeah. Was that a question, Michelle? Yep. I thought I saw your hand. Okay, that was it.
Sounds good. Any other announcement?
Check out the village website for Halloween information. Jim Tinger from the youth group and youth program, and Phoenix, who I'm not going to try to say her last name because I'm going to do it wrong, from the town, have put together a really nice package of activities to go on all day Halloween. We obviously we're very sad to cancel the parade, as Halloween is our high holiday, as Bill, I keep repeating him saying that because it's true. But there's lots of information. I think it's like hashtag or / Halloween at the end of the village website homepage. But yeah, anybody want to say anything else about Halloween? We've also posted or will be posting, the CDC recommendations for how to stay safe.
Sure, I think Ari's going to do that tomorrow.
I can't hear you, Bill.
Can't hear me?
You sound far away.
How's this?
Yeah, that's better.
Ari's going to post it tomorrow?
There's a bunch of information already up there, and then we have another sort of general announcement that's going to go out tomorrow.
Sure.
Do you want to read that? I don't have it up.
That statement is up.
Oh, it is up. Okay,
Yeah.
So I misspoke. It's there.
Just one other announcement, Tim. In addition to it being National Chocolate Day, in case you didn't know, it is. It's also National First Responders Day. So we have many first responders in our community, many who are volunteers, as well as career people. So give thanks to your volunteers who are working extra hard these days in the midst of a pandemic. So that's my announcement.
Oh, I forgot to say there's a seat open on the Affordable Housing Board because we had a resignation. So if folks are interested in volunteering in that capacity, you can contact me. ktobin@villageofnewpaltz.org.
Okay, why don't we jump into our business agenda? Anyone want to walk us through agenda item 1? If not, we can think about it and we can just go ahead and hear from our auditors. You want to take it away, Susan, and provide us with our annual update? Uh-oh, can't hear you.
Susan, I also wanted to offer, do you want to share your screen with that presentation, or do you want me to share my screen with it?
Melissa, what do you prefer, Melissa? Melissa Zotz, the senior manager on the engagement.
Hello. You can share it. That would be good. We'll just tell you which page to go.
Wonderful.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, I will start, and I'm Susan Barossi. I'm the engagement partner on the Village of New Paltz audit, and I'm with.
I'm Melissa Zott. I was the senior manager on the engagement this year.
So this year, the Village of New Paltz, we audited the fiscal year ending May 31st, 2020, and we're still on the cover page. And I remember leaving there last year, completing this and being there physically. And I believe it was maybe a week later, and it was a little bit cooler out than it is today. One thing that I want to commend, I want to really congratulate New Paltz on is that this audit was conducted remotely because it was during the pandemic, right, Melissa? I think it was pretty much total remote, right?
Yeah, it was 100% remote. Mm-hmm.
And just so that I get the names in, the team, the finance team that we dealt with directly and who worked so hard to pull all the information together and put this on the portal. I'm just going to go through these names very quickly. Nancy Bronco, Carol Coop, Roseanne James, Nicole Menko, Alberta Shaw, and Heather Nielsen really rolled up their sleeves to make sure that the audit started on the initial plan date and then timely, and so that we could make this meeting for today to do to present the financial statements. So I really say that was a lot of work on their part. The village, as you know, is made up of many funds: the general fund, the operational fund, the community development fund, a water fund, a sewer fund, a special purpose fund, and a capital projects fund. But tonight we're going to focus basically on the general fund. But I'm going to give you a little insight about, the audit process, and then Melissa's going to go into some details about the audit. Obviously, if there are questions, please, I'm so used to pulling up to the table with all of you and going over this. So I guess roll up to the screen, and if any questions, please let's make this a conversation. So if we go to the slide 1, PKF O'Connor Davies, the responsibilities to perform the audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards and ensure that the audit is designed to achieve what they call reasonable rather than absolute assurance that the financial statements are free from material misstatements. And what does that mean? Well, if the state controller had come in, or if you had an operational audit, they basically would pick an area and look at every single transaction of this area. Here, what we're doing is we're performing the audit for the fiscal year, looking at the funds, and basically doing more of a substantive audit approach, and also testing transactions. And through the process, we are also looking at the internal controls, not to give an opinion on those controls, but to see if the controls which are written are in place and are operating as planned. Any of us could list and say a to-do list or a wish list of what we're going to do, but it doesn't mean that those are we're really doing what's written and what's supposed to be done. So as a result, at the end of the process is we don't give an opinion on the internal controls, but we would communicate in writing any deficiencies in internal control that we might consider significant deficiencies, material weaknesses, or control, which the control more or less more housekeeping in nature. So Melissa will touch upon that later. We advised management of the appropriateness of the accounting policies, and the accounting policies were appropriate for the village, inclusive of, all of the changes that had to be made, during, when all of this started in March, because everything had to become paperless, right? Advised, so they were appropriate for the village. Communicate any fraud or illegal acts that were noted during the course of the audit, and have to emphasize that our audit cannot be relied on to identify all instances of fraud or illegal acts. But if they did occur and when we discovered them, we would report that directly to Nancy, the treasurer. And if we felt that she was involved, we would have to go above that. We'd go directly to the mayor. Or if we felt that we had to go even beyond, we would go to the board. Okay, but that there were no instances, suspicions, or allegations of fraud noted. Let's go to the next page, which the next page is page 2, and that's the responsibilities of management and those charged with governance. So those charged in governance would be, the mayor, and the board. So management is responsible for selecting and using the appropriate accounting policies and making sure that they're updated. Although, the 100-page document is prepared by PKF O'Connor Davies, there are no independence issues, because basically we're taking the trial balance from the Village of New Paltz, downloading it into our software and producing this document. So the financial statements, management is responsible for fairly presenting the financial statements in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, and establishing and maintaining effective internal control over financial reporting, and complying with laws, regulations, any provisions of contracts and agreements, providing all the financial records and information to the auditors. And at the end of the process, they have to provide a management, what they call a management representation letter, which is a letter that's signed that's saying to the auditors, we provided everything to you that you asked for, and everything that we provided to you, we truly believe is right. Let's go to the next page. Also, those charged with governance are responsible for communicating with the auditors and overseeing the reporting process. One positive thing that I have, well, of the many positive things I have to say about the Village of New Paltz, although at the end of this evening that this is the end of the audit process because we have presented the financial statements. There is an ongoing communication throughout the year, which is so good because even as the state, not only just because if standards change, where we talk with finance, we talk with the mayor, and then we exchange information with the board about any changes, but there are check-ins throughout the year to say that this is how the village is doing, and this is how the village is complying with any new standards. So there's a communication year-round, and management and those charged with governance are responsible for setting the proper tone at the top and managing, maintaining, and encouraging a culture of honesty and high ethical standards, which I can say, that's been working, and it's only because of that proper tone at the top and the ethical consciousness of the whole of the village itself. Not only the finance team, the board, the mayor, but the whole the departments and the employees. And then it's ongoing that they're designing and implementing policies and internal controls to prevent and detect fraud. The audit of the financial statements doesn't relieve management or those charged with governance of their responsibilities. So this is, ongoing, which through from the audit process, we know that everyone is aware of this. Let's go to the next page, and Melissa's going to go over the highlights of the general fund, which is the operational fund of the village.
Thank you, Susan. So Susan said this is the financial statement highlights. So it's your aggregated revenues, expenditures, and your other financing sources and uses. The amounts represented on this page are exclusive of the Fire Service Awards program. So I just wanted to explain that a little bit further before we jump into the numbers. The village has established in years past a service awards program for the volunteer members of the New Paltz Fire Department. So this program accumulates assets in an irrevocable trust, and these assets are solely dedicated to providing pensions to plan members in accordance with the benefit terms. So those assets are 100% restricted. Based on the trust agreement, the assets of the trust are not legally protected from the creditors of the village. So due to that fact and the standards we're required to abide by, which are the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, they issued statement number 73, which requires this type of fire service awards program to be included as part of the general fund. So for the ease of this presentation and the schedule, we've isolated just the general fund, which as Susan presented before, this is the operating fund of the village.
And I think that we had a dialogue about this last year, Tim, because it's kind of when you consolidate in the fire service award, it's kind of hard to isolate, the activity for the general fund itself.
So for the layout of the columns, the first column is your original budget, and that would represent the budget that was approved by the voters. The second column is your final budget, which would include any budget modifications or transfers made during the year. The third column is your actual activity that happened during the year. And then the last column is just the difference between your final budget column and your actual. So your total revenues came in at $3 million. Your expenditures came in approximately at $2.6 million. And your total other financing sources and uses resulted in a financing use of $470,000. So the village had originally anticipated using $98,000 of its fund balance, which was increased during the year to utilize $379,000. Instead, if you look at the actual column, the village only ended up using approximately $53,000, bringing your opening fund balance of $1.36 million down to $1.31 million. Are there any questions on this before we move on to the next page? Okay, we'll go to the next slide. So this slide will show you the fund balance.
Oh, yeah, this is
sure.
Tim. I do have a question.
Sure, of course. Let's go back.
So I just want to get this straight in terms of this fund that we use for the rewards program for the
Sure.
volunteer firefighters. So my understanding of as to why we originally, so I guess there's really two different things going on here, and I want to understand the difference. So are we pulling out to separate the firefighters award program separate from the general fund because it's not our asset? It's basically siloed, and it's now officially for those firefighters who've earned it. But this is not to be confused with what we did a year before the legislation was changed, because we had our fingers crossed that we were hoping Albany would improve the rules because it hadn't been changed in many years, and we lobbied hard on behalf of our volunteer firefighters to try to get the amount that we could put in their accounts increased. So we created a separate account the year before the law was changed as a way to signal that we intended to move that money there. So those are two different things, correct?
Yes. So the way that we're required to present it really depends on the trust agreement itself. There's several different factors that we look at in the trust agreement to determine if it would be inclusive as part of a fund of the village. If you had a fire fund, it would be part of the fire fund, but since there's no fire fund at the village, we put it with the general fund. If the trust agreement stipulated different facts, then it could be reported as a pension trust fund. So we do show it separately on this schedule because the funds are not budgeted. So the variance column would show different swings that wouldn't compare to the final budget column.
It was because of the new standard. Like if you go to the 100-page document on page 56 and 57, because of the new standard, what you had to do is almost showed as a consolidation where the general fund is in one column, and then you had to show the fire service awards and adding together, your investments to the general fund, but then showing the amount that is the fire service award programs piece is a restricted piece. It's almost like how when you have a not-for-profit, when you show restricted funds. So that was a standard that had to be implemented. I believe it was last year. So that's why if you go to page 56, you will see it that way, and then you'll see the activity that Melissa's showing is on page 57 of the financials. But we're just showing the general fund, not the fire service awards program. Okay.
Okay, great. So now, right, so that's much more helpful now in terms of getting an accurate picture, whereas before they were commingled.
Great.
Right.
And you can see here on the fund balance chart, I will point out the service award. So you'll see that the entire assets are fully restricted. So this slide will show you the fund balances of the village as a whole for fiscal year ended May 31st, 2020. This shows the village's general fund, the various funds that Susan pointed out earlier. I just want to focus on the general fund first. So your restricted fund balance ended at 1 million. And these reserves are legally restricted by either the general municipal law of the state of New York or other grantors. You can see that the two largest reserves in here, one would be your service award, which is approximately 420,000. So that would be the entire amount of the assets are fully restricted. The other largest reserve would be your fire apparatus purchase, which would be approximately 470,000. The next row, the next little bucket is the assigned amount, and that totaled to approximately 160,000. And this represents the amount that was used to balance the next year's budget, so the 2021 budget. So that leaves your unassigned at approximately 572,000. So on slide 7, we will go over the final unassigned as a percentage of annual expenditures. So we'll talk about that on slide 7. For the remaining funds, the community development fund is fully restricted to be spent on community development type projects. The water fund had 113,000 restricted fund balance. There was 218,000 to balance next year's budget, and then a remaining 202,000 to be spent on water activities. Your sewer fund had approximately 74,000 restricted, with 388,000 to be spent on sewer activities. Special purpose, that would be fully restricted. So that's your full activity of your special purpose fund. Your capital projects fund shows a deficit of $3 million. This $3 million is currently funded through a $3.5 million short-term bond anticipation notes payable. As a short-term note payable, the way that we account for it is it stays on the balance sheet as a liability and it does not fall to fund balance. So it is currently funded. So if we go to the next slide. Thank you. So this is the general fund balance sheet. Again, this is exclusive of the fire service awards. You have your current year column and your prior year column. So your total assets are comparable to the prior year. We had 1.4 versus 1.4. Your total liabilities did increase by approximately 100,000. And that was due to some two accruals for items that occurred in 2020 but ended up not being paid until 2021. And then your fund balance is what we went over in the previous slide. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. So this is the comparison. It's a 5-year history of your unrestricted general fund balance. This shows it your total unrestricted fund balance, your annual expenditures, and then your unrestricted fund balance. So what you have left to use for general fund expenditures as a percentage of total annual expenditures. So historically, the village usually stays around 20%. You can see that there was a dip in 2018, and that was usually due to some additional projects occurring. In 2020, there was an increase in 2 of your reserves. When you increase the reserves, your unrestricted would end up decreasing a little bit. So the reserve for the fire apparatus purchase, the restricted fund balance ended up increasing by 50,000. And then the designated for subsequent years expenditure increased by approximately 60,000. Okay.
So I guess to point out, which is so important now, is that when you're looking at this, you know, your unrestricted fund balance is 17% of the total expenditures, but through what's going on now, since COVID hit in March, really hit New York in March, you know, the stronger your fund balance is, the better, you know, the best for you. You know, fund balance used to be critiqued negatively if you had it, and now everybody needs it. So as you can see, you know, and then you had certain projects ongoing, and that's why there was that dip really from the 25% to the 17%. But throughout the years, you've maintained a pretty good percentage, exceeding 15% all the way from 2016. And any swings have been explainable and pinpointed. More or less, they've been planned swings.
Right. So Susan, you know, we've been looking closely at making sure we have some sort of fund balance policy, if not officially stated, but just something that we think about regularly. And Nancy and I have regularly discussed preferring to have, you know, something at least in the low 20%. And I think that worked out okay for us in fiscal year 2020, and that's why we dipped down and, we finished the year at 17. So the padding and the fund balance did exactly what it's supposed to do. So we're actually currently, it's not an audit, but we're working with the state comptroller's office because we were selected as a village that they wanted to take a closer look at so they could understand individual municipalities' financial picture and how we've endured the COVID pandemic. So the comment that we received yesterday during our conversation with the comptroller's office is that they felt, we're doing relatively well through COVID because we looked at a 6-month window from March of 20 through September of 20, and we compared it to the year earlier, and they were largely pleased. But I think that the pandemic was probably not as troubling as many of us feared it would be in March and April. But it also, I think, in some ways kind of woke us up, and maybe that conventional thinking of having a fund balance of only, something in the neighborhood of 20%, maybe that's not enough. Like, what if this pandemic actually was scarier than what we've just gone through, and
it's not over yet, right?
Right. The jury is out. Like, what will things feel like in another 6 to 12 months? So, do you have any updated feelings on a recommended fund balance policy for municipalities like ours, based on what we're all living through?
So not only do we handle municipalities like villages and towns and cities and counties, but we handle many school districts as well. And we find it's the stronger the fund balance, the better right now, because we really have to see what COVID revenues are going to come in this new fiscal year, right? And how they're going to be spent, and also the collectability of any receivables that you have or monies that you think that you're going to get. So it's been, for our school districts, we used to do like comparatives of, variances, percentage comparatives, ratios to prior years. But this is such an unusual year, even, more unusual even than 9/11, right? So that year. But we feel that we have to monitor. It's kind of like month by month monitoring, because I don't know what the expectation is of the revenues that are going to be coming in the future and what has come in to date, because this is basically a picture as of May 31st. And as you said, it was the beginning, and you could say mid-March this COVID started. It's not really enough data here to see the true effect of what COVID's going to be. What revenues has the village seen in COVID revenues to date? Has there been a lot available?
Have our revenues taken a
Well,
hit?
did you get any special, COVID revenues, special additional to cover expenses that you incurred, that was specifically pinpointed for the pandemic?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. There's been no assistance whatsoever for villages.
Right. Right.
Yeah. The only thing that we've done is, we effectively, entered into a spending freeze, and we've just been careful because we're now having to endure a smaller revenue picture than we budgeted for because of receiving less money during the last several months in terms of parking enforcement and parking meters.
Right. And then here, not only fund balance, but what's so important now is the availability of reserves, right? So as you can see, when we look at, you have to really closely look at the reserves, and then how to build those reserves, because those reserves are the cushion for the future. And when Melissa and I talk about the reserves, which were the breakdown, the buckets of the fund balance, and if we can go back to slide 5 here.
Mm-hmm.
Right. See that the general fund there's 1.7 there, but the 423 there is the service awards. And you do have buckets, but one bucket here is the 160 for the designated for the year that we're in now, right? For May 31, 21, the use of that, right? So it's really you have to really monitor the expenditures and sticking closely to the budget and see how the revenues are coming in, and more or less adjusting your budget, month by month, really week by week.
I guess one positive thing, but also one incredibly scary thing. Last week, we we have the two serial bonds and the two 1-year bond anticipation notes, and we went to the market and had institutions bid for the right to lend us money for another year. And we actually borrowed $2.7 million at 0.59%. So, we're going to save some money in terms of interest payments over the next 12 months. But, what does that say about how the, lenders are, it just seems like maybe they're pretty nervous about, they're less nervous about whether we're a good credit, but it seems like maybe they're nervous about the strength of this economy.
Right. They're not, and it's a real positive that you are a good credit, right? That you are paying the debt, and you have the fund balance there, and you have enough fund balance there and reserves there to continue, right? And where there are others, we have a lot of other clients, who are struggling right now. Okay, didn't build up those reserves. Okay, so that's why it's a difficult question to answer. What's the right amount of fund balance to maintain? But you have to look at the spending patterns, and one positive thing is also the village continued with its projects and kept everything pretty much on target, right? So even though the pandemic happened.
Yeah, we definitely didn't do a few things though to try to save money as part of our spending freeze.
Right. And in fact, I think one of the comments here, I think there were just a few projects that just recently closed, right? And there are going to be resolutions to close them subsequent to the audit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which projects are those?
Let's see.
We have that right. The Morello pool and the fire truck. No, those two didn't have activity during the year, right? There was the Morello pool and the fire truck, right?
Right, those had no activity during the year. Mm-hmm.
During the year, and then there are certain projects here that we have that they have to be closed out. They had balances. The projects were completed, and they're going to be closed out in this fiscal year.
Yeah, I guess that's like another question, right? Because it seems like Nancy likes the idea of keeping some of those project lines open. Like, yeah, it's only every few years do we do a capital project at Morello Pool, or every few years do we buy a fire truck. So
right,
we always have activity in those accounts, but I think you guys prefer that we don't have those extra accounts because it just feels unnecessarily messy from, when you're trying to look and understand what's going on. You'd rather just see that we've closed those accounts.
Right.
Is that correct?
It is the accounting rule that, once the project's completed, you're supposed to close out the project. And if the monies initially came from general fund, transfers over, then the closed out and any remaining proceeds have to go back. If they were for debt, then they would have to be restricted. The extra additional funds would be restricted to pay back the debt. I think it's just for clarity's sake. In the financials, and we don't have to go to it, on page 78, one positive thing about the village is that you keep your projects intact, very neat, very, you look at the authorizations, what's spent current year. They're constantly being monitored. It's not a disheveled schedule, okay? They're constantly being monitored, and it shows. It's just that here, because of the accounting standards, what we have to do is, if the project is not immediately closed, as soon as the project is closed within that fiscal year, we have to report on that, which that was what we considered the housekeeping in nature internal control finding, which was, very, very minimal, very minimal, but that we have to talk about. And another very interesting item also was, okay, when we came in to do the audit, your year end is May 31. We were there shortly after, right? And that doesn't give the village finance team a lot of time to close down their trial balance and, hand that over to us. So that means all the adjustments have to be made. And basically, there were only 2 adjustments made. I think one was because, when we have to look at subsequent disbursements, and there was a very minimal amount of 110,000, which had to be accrued because it was subsequently paid, right? And then there was another amount showing recording an installment purchase debt, which is basically a wash because we had to pick up a revenue and expenditure. So it shows from the audit process that you are looking at closely at the financial statements and the results monthly and comparing it to budget. So, and I feel that, that's so important, and that's been a big factor about those municipal entities who've been able to deal with this crisis, effectively, because if they were strong with their financial controls and their internal controls to start with, and if they had a very a board that was very involved, yes, it was a crisis, but they were focused on this, and they're looking at the fluctuations, I'm not saying that, those that are having difficulty, that their finance teams weren't involved, but I'm saying it helped if the finance teams were, right?
Yeah.
So, and these were these were very minimal housekeeping in nature comments here that we put there.
Yeah, so as Susan mentioned, the capital projects fund is just informative to just inform the board that 2 projects had no financial activity during the year. What you could do too is you could, if you know that you're going to have projects with different phases, or if it's going to be different years, you might want to approve or adopt different budgets for those different phases. So that way on your project length schedule, you would have different lines. You could close out that portion of the project when that project is completely spent. So that's it. That's another option. The special purpose fund is that comment, again, housekeeping. All the activity is recorded. Ideally, we would want to see it broken out by individual trust that's being run through there instead of in the aggregate. And then the encumbrances comment is just identifying that best practice is to utilize a purchase order system. And that is all of the comments that we had. So if we go to the next slide.
Can you help us understand the encumbrances or the purchase order system that you just described?
Sure. So what we would want to see, it helps plan. Normally, if you have an encumbrance system, any encumbrances left open at fiscal year end would roll forward into the next year. So you would, on the chart that we showed earlier of your general fund, your original budget column would be the original budget approved by or adopted by the voters. And then it would include any rollover of the prior encumbrances. So it would give you kind of more wiggle room for those purchases.
It's more or less like the unspent budget items that were approved in the past. Then I think what you're doing, you're closing them out, right, and not rolling them over. But you take that unspent amounts and you add it to the new budget, and then that increases it, and it didn't increase the budget. It's just showing all right, these were the budget, the budget dollar amounts that were still left that we didn't spend in the prior year, and then it's added through. But I think the accounting system doesn't have this, like that, the robust, you don't have that robust accounting system in order to keep track of that. And I think that's what we had talked about with Nancy. You know, how can you do that maybe in the future?
But you also mentioned something about purchase order software.
Well, the purchase orders. So those purchase order software we talked about was the fact where, for the purchase orders, if they could be paperless, right? We were talking about so that they could be approved, you know, by department heads, or everything could be more paperless instead of everything being in paper. And I think that was another thing. So typically when a municipality now wants to, you know, purchase a system, I think that it's best that they do a wish list and then interview different software companies to see if, you know, and issue an RFP, right? Request for a proposal, and say, this is our wish list. This is what we want, but we want ease. We want, you know, yes, we want to be paperless, but we want ease of use, and see, you know, which software companies can fulfill that and streamline the process.
Why wouldn't we use our existing financial software in code? Like, might they be able to?
Well, you know, I don't use the software every day, right? So because we're basically, but you may be able to if you ask the question. So I really couldn't answer because, you know.
Sometimes the softwares have different modules that you have to kind of purchase as an add-on.
Yeah.
So that might be an option if you contact the vendor of the software and see what kind of services that they have to offer as like an add-on purchase.
And then there's some municipalities that have what they call shared services, and then they consolidate with, so they buy these software together and share it. I think you've had this software for quite a while, right? I think so. The existing software that you have now, because we were having a lot of discussions with Nancy about this. But what was very good, that was, you know, and we were concerned overall, because remember, we handle so many municipal clients and not-for-profit clients and commercial clients. Although, you know, you had to work remotely and had to be paperless, it worked. And it was like, almost like, you know, you had to do that all of a sudden, right? And everything, but that took a lot of effort on the finance team's part. Even with the technology, right? Having this remote meeting.
Yeah.
So
I mean, is that anything that you could help us with? Like, if we're, you know, trying to do that research to find out who would be a good vendor?
You know, we've done this from other municipalities, and there has not been any independence issues in the two areas that, one is being, you know, we have an IT team. We have a director at IT who does cyber evaluations, right? And we have also, we cannot choose the software because that would affect our independence, but we can do, because of our exposure with the audit process and all your controls, we could work with you to develop your wish list. And then so that you have the proper wish list when you do go out for your request for proposal. And we've done that with other municipalities, and be it a school, village, town, city, county, you know, and even commercial entities.
Yeah. I think we want to start taking a look at possibilities. Like, we feel very comfortable with how we're doing things, and, you know, we strongly believe that Nancy runs a really tight ship. So, you know, we don't want to reinvent wheels necessarily, but we do think that there might be some efficiencies to be had. So that's why I think we want to, you know, gather probably those questions as you're suggesting, that we get together and then, you know, be somewhat patient and find the right fit, but then also be careful. Like, you know, we don't have the the resources to go ahead and dump money into an expensive new system either.
Right.
So-
No, exactly. So, and you know, what's good about Nancy, I think when Nancy came on board, she stayed with the system you had. I've seen so many municipalities where somebody new comes in now that because they don't want to learn the the system that's existing there, they buy a new one and they don't even go through the process of evaluating it. But also, I think it's good, and it's not really expensive. Just it's almost like almost like a research project for the system, right? But you have to think about succession planning too. So you want to have a system that, you know what, you don't need something that's more than what you need, but you want something that could be developed and grow with you, and also that could fit into your succession planning, right? Because your team will change, right? But you want to be able to have somebody new come in, and when somebody new comes in or someone retires or someone leaves, that there's ease of use and the system's constantly being updated.
Got it. All right.
So in the end, May 31, 2020, fiscal year end, the village ended up in a healthy position with reserves and an amount designated to help balance this year's budget. And we'll be interested to see what comes out of the state controller's report. In fact, we'll keep in touch with the finance team about that. And we really thank everybody's involvement at the village and the
Perfect.
board level and the mayor level.
Thank you. And your team.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we're there for you.
We know.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay. So let's continue. The Reverence Day or Day of the Dead will take place on Sunday, November 1st, 2020 from 1 to 3 at New Paltz Rural Cemetery on Plains Road. And last year, some may recall that we go ahead and committed to every first Sunday in November to be Reverence Day. So we're encouraging people to participate or be mindful of this New Paltz designated day again. Anybody want to comment further on?
Just then, I got an email that they're requesting, and of course, it's an obvious one, that everyone wear masks and abide by social distancing at the ceremony during that time.
Absolutely. Okay, next item, the short-term rental law. So I updated the penalties and enforcement section, and then Will took another edit to it, but it seems super straightforward. We wanted to have some enforcement mechanism that only involved our building department, and we don't feel like this is a law where we need police muscle to be involved. So we updated the proposed law. So it says exactly that. So I think it's ready for us to set a public hearing, unless you guys want to discuss other items within the draft.
Hey, Tim, at one point you asked to see Springfield's law. Do you remember that email?
Yeah, I saw that you were able to find what they did. I mean, all I did was I read the article. I didn't, and I heard the interview with one of the Springfield Council people. But I was just kind of pleased that so many of the points they were raising were things that we included in our law. But I didn't take a look at the actual language for their law. I mean, I don't know if you feel like it's worth a review to see if there's any good ideas that we could appropriate.
Yeah, I did a quick review. I didn't have too much time today. I got it this morning, but and I don't want to hold this up, but certainly if you get a chance to give it a quick read, might be helpful.
Yeah, I'd like to get it to public hearing. I think it's ready. There were a couple minor changes, changing the word traditional to primarily in that first section. And then my only, I said a couple, but I think that's the only edit. I think Bill.
What I like about primarily is it's actually measurable. So.
Right, and we're putting it in the zones to reflect that, right? So, I mean, we are getting that specific. That section's just for context. So, yeah. I guess and I'm sorry, I probably should have asked Will this question. It just confuses me when we put definitions embedded in a law that it seems like we already have defined elsewhere. And did we check and make sure that there's no problems if these things, because it seems like a lot of these items must be defined elsewhere. Maybe not short-term rental, but the other stuff.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I suggested tenant be included in there, but I didn't check the rest of the code to see if it was.
I guess at this moment, I would just say I'll ask Will, and I think if that was an edit, once we went to public hearing, it wouldn't be substantive if those things exist elsewhere.
What, just cross-checking definitions in other sections of the code?
Yeah.
Well, I guess I have a approach question, which is this redundant with other sections in terms of definitions? And then if so, we should make sure that it's apples, because you can't define something. It has to be exactly the same. You can't define it differently in two different places. But I think since it's in this little glossary section, it doesn't impede us from moving forward.
So let's
and I'm sure tenant or renters is defined elsewhere as well, Bill,
okay.
Right? So it kind of falls under
our satisfaction. We'll take a look.
I've been starting to talk to people as much as I can about this, and been getting a lot of I haven't had one person tell me it was a bad idea. They were all very happy that we were doing it. So I'd like to get it out there so we can start more systematically hearing from people.
So let's set a date.
So I guess it's just an accept all changes thing at this point, Ari.
Well, is it, I mean, you guys just stuck in a bunch of new comments.
I just went over all of those. I don't think I missed any of them. Oh, I think Bill had one about written documentation that I didn't mention.
Yeah, we need to find out what people ask for in terms of proof of residency. And maybe that's somewhere else in the code, but I think it should be included in this particular law.
Wait, I can't hear what you're saying, Bill.
I'm sorry, let me switch, hold on.
He's saying, it's that spot where he's saying proof of residency. I don't know, I feel like that's more procedure than law.
Where are you guys reading?
I'm trying to find it. For 129.25.4.
I mention it because I've seen other municipalities in their LTRs. STRs mention that.
All right, Bill. Will actually said you could put something in here about getting an affidavit. We could just pluck what he wrote, I think.
Okay.
Right?
An affidavit from who?
From the resident. It's under Will's comment. Affidavit from the permanent resident detailing the nature of their occupancy for at least 9 months, supported by proof of local connections such as employment, school, business ownership, et cetera, et cetera.
What about like a utility bill
Yep.
or just some other bills?
Voter registration.
Yeah,
I
voter
guess-
registration. Voter registration really would be best, because if you lie about that, that's a felony.
So do we want to brainstorm and wordsmith this right now, or do we want to leave it as
I would be
is?
fine if you just put where you're registered to vote. Well, that not everyone's registered to vote, right? And I guess you technically could.
Yeah, I think you don't want to limit it to one way, but it should be on the punch list. Like I keep thinking of, when you go to get a passport and they're like, you need one thing from column A and 3 things from column B. Like, not that we should get that complicated, but I think people are used to, documenting identity.
Right.
I'm writing in here.
Nice, thank you. Do some
Thank you.
writing. I think such as instead of including.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, that works for me. I mean, you're still leaving it up to a
To the
form
code
acceptable
enforcement.
to the code inspector, and I'm
Yeah,
okay
we're
with that
leaving
too.
it- Yeah, which I'm fine with, because if someone like is not, for whatever reason, doesn't have the utility bill in their name or is not registered to vote, this still could be kosher. So let's leave that door open for that and let the building inspector, code enforcement official make that final determination.
Yeah, we don't want to narrowly define it so much so that particular circumstances, because I don't think we could think of all the particular
Yeah.
circumstances.
So that, are we good with just those two as like, we're making 2 solid suggestions?
Yep.
Should it be and or? Voter registration or utility bill?
Yeah. Or
Okay. Okay, then I'm going to delete this comment or just say that we're okay with it.
yeah. Resolved.
Resolve it. I mean, you can look in chapter 129, like I just opened it up on code 360. There's like definitions right in the beginning. So we could take these definitions and just add them
there.
to that. I mean, that
Yeah,
might be
I just hate when I don't think of Will questions because he might have had a reason to put it there, but I think it's all right.
Well, I think the reason that you put that in this draft is because your intention is to then move it into the definitions section, even though sometimes it ends up by itself. But I would agree with you, like all the definitions should be in definitions if it's for a particular
Well, he
section.
made it 129.24, like as if it was
Oh
gonna be
yeah,
in here.
okay, I see what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for the reader, it's much better. The person looking at the law, you don't want to have to look elsewhere for definitions. So that's like an argument for redundancy, but it just creates work to make sure that everything's aligned.
So I just accepted all the additions that I made in the penalties enforcement section. And tenant or renters definition. Yeah, we already have a definition for tenant in 129. Says a person entitled to exclusive possession and occupancy of a residential unit and the right of use of the appropriate something. I mean,
I wasn't in the right place to be knowing if you were.
renters. Okay, I don't think we need this.
Tenant is
I-
also in another section as well.
What?
Tenant is also defined in Chapter 1, General Provisions.
Chapter,
Chapter 1, General Provisions, Chapter 1, Article 1, Adoption, 1978 Code, 1 to 2 definitions.
oh, you're just looking in
Yeah.
Chapter 1. Oh, general provisions, definitions.
Yeah.
Ah. Yeah, but then I think you only want to deal with definitions in chapter 129, because each chapter could have its own definitions. Like this is an enormous housekeeping exercise if you do it.
Mhm.
If you just have one definition section for the entire code, I think each chapter should have its own definitions. But each law doesn't need its own definitions.
Right.
Are you all okay with Ari sharing her screen so people can see what the heck we're talking about? I said yes.
I'm comfortable, sure.
Do one of you by chance want to share the screen so I can take notes at the same time? I'm
don't
happy
have
to
it.
do it, but
I
it
don't
just,
have it up on the same machine, so it would take me a while.
okay, that's fine. I can do it. It just limits my ability to.
Yeah, no, for the same reason I just said. That's why I have to myself. Sorry.
I don't think we need to do it because we're basically done with this.
Yeah, we're
I think
done
we can-
anyway. It was
I think we can. I think we can.
for a second. It would be nice to show the public that. We should do that more. We don't think of it because it's new environment.
We can thank Terrence for texting me.
Thank you, Terrence.
We can also summarize for Terrence like what we're considering. I mean, basically, the idea of this short-term rental law is to permit short-term rentals in commercially zoned districts and permit short-term rentals in residentially zoned districts, but only if it's a primary resident and the person
Owner occupied.
It doesn't have to be owner occupied because you could be.
Oh, right. That's
You could
sorry.
be a
That's right.
renter.
There's a phrase in there that has those multiple. Yes.
It's
Thank
the permanent resident. So the prohibition on short-term rental shall not apply to permanent residents within residential zones of the village who are able to demonstrate with written documentation in the form acceptable to the village code enforcement officer or building department official, such as voter registration or utility bills, that such individuals occupy the property in question for no less than 9 months out of each calendar year. So as long as you're a permanent resident and you're there for at least 9 months, you can short-term rent out a room in your house every single day. But then there's the other thing where
Yeah, the 9 months thing is if you're not in the house, if the primary occupant is not in the house.
yeah, and I guess the other thing, and this is interesting because does it even matter if you rent it for every day? Because then it just becomes a long-term rental.
If it's with one person or same group of people.
Sorry, what's the wrinkle? Can you say it again?
Well, I'm just looking at number 1 and 129.25.
Yeah, now I'm so confused.
I think the point, this is the why we wrote it the way we did, is that we're basically saying you can't do a short-term rental in any residentially zoned district. And then we go
But
on
there's
to
an
say,
unless, yes.
then we go
It
on to
just
say,
feels like, but this standing alone seems like it's a never thing. Like if you just looked at that, it looks like a never.
yeah, but that we had to write it that way because then we go on to say that you can,
Right. Okay. All right. Yeah. It just, maybe it's just the way law has to be written, but it's
yeah,
the
I think it's like
the unless is,
you're
you got to
creating
keep reading
boundaries.
for the unless.
Yeah, you're creating boundaries and then you create exceptions for the boundaries.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Perfectly stated.
Yeah, I mean, our attorney has looked at this, so.
Yeah. And I also feel like I've looked at it so many times. It gets harder to look at the more times you look at it.
I mean, it might not be a best practice to keep these. I mean, I think your suggestion is a reasonable one where like, do we necessarily want these definitions in here? Like, should they be in like a centralized definition section?
Or both.
That's been discussed with other chapters as well.
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure we put like when we did the security deposit law, but I thought it was only new definitions. But I'm okay moving forward. Ari, when would we be able to do the public hearing if we decided to do so right now?
November 18th,
Why not until then?
because our next meeting is next week and that's the meeting after that.
Okay, next week is too soon.
Yeah, you need 10 days notice.
Okay. All right, I motion that we set a public hearing for this draft law, November 18th, 2020.
Second.
Second,
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay.
So Ari, you want to tell us about the webinar you enjoyed yesterday? Pandemic Operations Plan Update.
Sure. So NICOM did a webinar and they went through Governor Cuomo's mandate that all municipalities have to have a pandemic operations plan in place by April 1st, which we were aware of, and we've been talking about it, but it really brought to light for me that the conversations that we've been having really are about a work from home policy and not about the pandemic operations plan. I didn't quite separate these things in my mind the way I now have. And one of the big things that we need to be super aware of is that we need to give the union 150 days to respond. So the plan needs to actually be complete by Thursday, February 4th in order to be submitted to our union reps so that they can review it and give us a response. And any adjustments that need to be made can be made. So that's actually like super soon. But the good news is that everybody who attended the NICOM training will be getting a template for this plan. Of course, it's all going to have to be tailored to individual communities. It's very much like our emergency operations plan that we would be putting in place with our local emergency preparedness committee. So the group that we've been meeting with weekly for our COVID meetings seems to be a great group to certainly begin this process. Obviously, the LEPC should also be involved, but it could be done in conjunction with the village and the town. One of the big things that they did say, because somebody asked this question of whether or not it could be done on the county level, for example, and all municipalities included in it, is just not, they said it just won't work that way. It's too detailed, it's too nuanced, and it has to be really tailored to specific municipalities. So for that reason, we have to create our own. But hopefully the template we get will be something that'll give us like a huge head start. And I will definitely send that to everybody. The link here is just the link to the presentation yesterday, which has a lot of great bullet points in it and good information. But hopefully the template will come soon, and then that will give us something to work with. And so I was also talking to Tim earlier, and I said that what I think we should do maybe sooner is modify our workplace safety plan to include more of a work from home policy. And that can be just, a pretty simple modification. I can write something up and you guys can review it, edit it as you see fit. But that could be something that's done sooner, just to account for, cold and flu season and all the things that we've been talking about already. But yeah, if there's any questions, hopefully I can answer them.
Thanks for continuing to take on this exciting part of our job, Ariana.
You're welcome. The webinar was great. It actually was like really interesting. I totally don't have a problem doing this stuff. And obviously it helps keep our community safe. So I'm super into it.
Thank you, Ari.
And Bill, did you also do it yesterday?
What's that?
Bill, were you also on that call, the webinar yesterday?
I'm sorry, I was not.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree that NICOM, they run good programs, so they can bring lots of humdrum topics to life in a useful and informative way.
Yeah, I think we're super smart to use those resources that are available to us. It just kind of always boggles me. Like, I get that the whole local control and autonomy thing, but sometimes having so many local governments have to figure things out just doesn't make any sense. So NICOM is great in terms of helping get a head start on things.
Cool. Okay, so the next item is we finally have a construction management agreement for the village between us and the Palumbo group. So I'd like to motion that we accept the agreement.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. I heard that in a movie the other day. I like that.
You're not supposed to say that out loud, but okay. When has that ever stopped us?
Okay, the next item is the resolution regarding additional water costs. So this has to do with the Environmental Facilities Corp grant that we received for $3 million towards our approximately $5 million water project. So we had a resolution from a couple of years ago when we applied for this grant. So this is just an updated grant that includes the updated probable cost estimates for the different pieces of this water project. And that's why the number is 122,000, because it's that amount different than it was a couple of years ago when we first passed the resolution. So I motion that we move it.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item, bills and claims. I motion we move the bills and claims resolution.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So the next item is an application for a fee waiver. So we've been working with Stewart's on the 10-foot wide proposed shared use bike ped path on the northern side of their property. So when the planning board reviewed this Stewart's application, they just anticipated Stewart's having a sidewalk on that northern portion of the property, but with the town working on the shared bike path, shared bike ped path, it makes more sense to have something that's identical to, you know, the rest of Henry W. up to the north, including our village section of sidewalk that we've been working on getting constructed, and we've been working with DOT. I actually met with DOT officials in the field early this morning. So Stewart's has been super accommodating, and they'll technically need to go back before our planning board to update their site plan. So there would be a fee. So I just want to waive that fee for them because, you know, this benefits us, and it's only $450. So we would have them back before the planning board and not charge them the fee. So I motion that we go ahead and do that.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The other piece, Ariana and I were talking about this today. So we're going to separate the Ann Oliver house at 5 Broadhead from the Stewart's property when we go ahead and acquire that before we formally issue the RFP, when we're going to be looking for developers or contractors to restore that house. So there will be no fee involved to do that work. So we were talking about whether or not we needed to waive that fee, but there's no fee for that review. So we won't need to do anything there. That's what we found out today, Ariana?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so we moved the fee waiver. We're all good with not charging Stewart's for them allowing us to build some of this trail on their property. Okay, do you guys want to provide any update regarding the planning board or ZBAs as liaisons?
Planning board met last week on Tuesday, the 20th, with a application for 215 Main Street to change that space from a retail space to a restaurant bar. And then there was a application for a porch. So that was about it for that. Very brief.
What's 215 Main Street?
Sorry.
You said it's a retail. What?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't remember.
It's Medusa's.
Medusa, there you go. Thank you.
Oh, which space?
Zach actually said it.
What's that?
We could actually thank Zach for that one.
Thank you,
So
Zach.
what retail space was there that's now going to become a bar? I mean, not a bar, a restaurant. Zach, are you listening?
What was the retail space that's going to become a bar restaurant?
It's right now the antiques shop
Oh,
at the bottom.
Right now it's the antique shop.
Oh, the antique shop's going to become a restaurant? Because I saw they were also making some changes to the space that used to be Rock Yoga. I'm wondering if that's connected.
That was not part of the plan that we saw.
That was not part of the plan that they saw.
Okay. Maybe it was just to the entrance. Okay, we've not had a ZBA meeting, right?
Correct. We have not.
Okay. I don't think we have anything else on this agenda, right?
Nope.
Sounds good.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Motion carries.
Aye.
Cool.
I
All right,
keep
good
hearing
night.
that Voices Carry song in my head. Voices carry. So it's like Tim saying, motions
sing it.
carry.
Hey, Ari,
Go
can
ahead, Chair.
Ari, can you
Over
stay with
for
me
Chair.
for a minute after this?
Sure. Yeah, let me end the stream. Good night. Good night, New Paltz.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Right.
All right, we're no longer